So, I'm going to be talking about product dev QA triangle. Why a triangle? I'll explain a bit later. And for a short introduction, I've been a tester for d.labs for about 2 years now. Before that, I was a tester at Mark Engineering for 2.5 years, and before that, 5 years of internal customer support. So basically testing for the last 10 years. And I still think it's the best job in the world. But at d.labs, we have a team of 5 testers now. Yeah, 5 testers. We just got one. Of varying background and experience, and since we are a service company, the products we make are not for us, but for our clients. And for our clients being mostly startups, this makes for a very dynamic work and environment, and things change extremely quickly. Now, I'm involved in a single project. The rest of the team is involved in what, two or three projects. So it's never a dull day. But the thing is, no 2 projects we do are the same. We've got over 50 developers. It's what, 7, 8 teams. Each team has their own project. No 2 projects are the same, especially in regards to QA. A big project has 2 or 3 QA, we have 1, some projects don't have any. Depends on the client, depends on the stage, depends on the extent of the project. So it's a very different situation every time. What I'm going to explain is a bit about the project I'm on, but it kind of changes a lot. Now, let's start with the whole triangle. How many of you are testers actually here, QA? Just, that's a lot. Product managers, any? Cool, we have 3. Any developers? No, that's a nice mix. Anybody, how many of you are working on a project that has all 3 roles connected together? Half and half, okay, cool. So let's start with a simple story, the developer. Usually on small projects, you can have just one developer, they communicate with the client, all goes well, nothing special. But as soon as you start complicating things a bit, and you get a bit more people involved, since you got a few developers, it's also nice to have a product manager. Somebody who can keep an eye on what's actually going to be done, what has to be done, when it has to be done. And that's all nice as well, but the problem is who tests here. Usually the developers do their own tests, product manager tests, everybody tests. Now, that sounds okay, but developer testing their own code is usually a recipe for disaster, because in my experience, and that goes even for the most experienced developers, they tend to, the problem is you're testing something that you've been coding about 15 minutes ago, so you know how it's supposed to work, and you are going to test more or less the same path. While we, with QA gets involved, the first thing I do is try to break that thing. And I usually succeed. I have to say, usually succeed. So, and to be honest, in product manager's role, yeah, they should test, but not a lot. Product manager should test at the end or somewhere in between, but product manager's role is to take care of the product, not making sure developers do their own thing. So if you introduce a QA person, the dynamic changes a bit, and the developer should still worry about quality, but not as much as before. What we expect usually is the so-called happy path, as in make sure the thing works in normal conditions. That's all I want from you. That's pretty much it. Everything else, I'll take care of it. I'll take the edge cases, I'll take the browsers, I'll take the weird combinations, weird signals. I'll do the rest. You just make sure the thing works initially. And the same is for product managers. As soon as you got a tester there, they can focus on what they really should focus on, which is the product. But this sounds like a nice story. Ben, I will present you a case where this story actually unfolded letter by letter. It started off as one person writing a blog. That was 7 years ago, I think, something like that. It then continued with that person deciding that it should become more than a blog, a web page. So they hired us, and initially the situation was they had what, two developers, I think. And all of a sudden, a year ago, this project went from client plus 2 developers to a project that had 2 product managers, 7 developers in Slovenia, 4 developers in UK, and 0 QA, interestingly enough. So they thought, okay, let's bring in the QA. This happened after a lot of talking, because they were concerned how bringing in a person with that role would affect the whole team, would affect the project itself. So I think I had about 3 or 4 interviews with the CTO before they decided, okay, I'm a good match. And even then, the problem was that product managers sometimes have bad experience with previous experience with QA, so they're not very happy about the idea. This was the case here. Out of the 2 product managers, one never worked with QA, the other one had bad experience. So naturally, I was matched with the person who had bad experience. So the decision was work with one product manager initially. It was a team of 3 developers, and it proved to be a success in a few months. The system proved to be work. There was a bit of adjustment, but it proved to work. So I started working with the other product manager and all the developers. And this was depending on priorities, because there was still 1 person versus 11 developers. So, but luckily we were working on a few large features, so it was a bit of a switching, and I was actually planned into the work, as in they made sure I was there testing the correct feature at the correct time. It wasn't like you're going to be testing everything. No, this is the time you're going to be testing this, this is the time you're going to be testing this. So it took a bit of adjustment, but we got it down. Before I actually started work, there was a bit of a foundation of what has to, the rules. Basically, we set a few rules, and the first one is QA is not a dumping field for bad code. That was the first rule given. CTO made it very clear he expected from the developers to still test their code. I actually had an assignment by the CTO that if I found out somebody is delivering bad code, as in not testing what they've done, I can report them. I never did have to, because the guys are working their job, but I could report them back to the CTO, because they made sure that each developer is in charge of the code quality. QA is here to prevent major bugs coming through and help out on testing. It's not, I am not the sole tester. Even now, when sometimes happen that I am the sole tester, the product managers actually apologize for that situation. So QA and product cooperate on features. This is when the feature is planned. They actually talk to me as in, what do you think? And that's, as far as I'm concerned, an ideal situation, because you can get feedback at the start when the whole thing is planned, because that's when you prevent some weird things happening. So, and QA is to be included in all the dailies and as many plannings as possible to be better informed. Because in the end, I do not test everything. I don't actually test every feature around, but I do know about everything that's going on in the project. I do know about every work of every developer that's going on. And devs and QA talk when questions or problems arise. The problem we have here, well, it's not a problem, it's a situation basically, is the product managers are not in Slovenia. Most of the development team is product managers in the UK. So it's a bit of a hassle to get to them. So it's not, we try to avoid the situation where the developer is constantly talking to the product managers. And it used to be like this, so they talk to me and then I talk to the product manager, because I could answer most of the questions actually, at least the little things, and I actually have their trust to make the little decisions, I can call them. It's not, as long as it's not a product affecting decision, I can actually make it. And they're not going to question that. Things have changed a bit because now there's too many features being developed at the moment, so actually I don't have so much control over it, but I guess trust is the key. Why? I'm going to go back a bit. During this last year, the inclusion of QA in basically every meeting meant that I had complete visibility of everything that was done. I knew about everything that was done. I did not know particularly, I did not code, but I knew what the feature did, I knew what it affected, I knew how it worked. That's because when you start testing, you need to know. Especially in our case, I'm going to tell you what our case is, but later on. But in our case, you have to know because there's way too many sections connected to each other. And if you don't know what something does, you can't test it properly. Literally, if you're just the guy at the end checking that Trello story or Jira ticket or whatever, if you don't know the background, if you don't know everything that surrounds it, you're not going to be able to do your own thing. So that helped, the inclusion helped. I also gained their trust slowly, so basically product can rely on QA to point out any issues, and the product can trust the devs to maintain high quality. The thing is that I've got an ideal project for this one. I can actually pretty much say anything as long as I have a good reason for it. I mean, I can suggest anything, but it's not like I don't like this. I have to explain to them why I don't like this. If I don't like something, I have to think for it. I have to find a good reason. And as long as it's a very good reason, and if they agree with it, changes are made. Devs can rely on QA to do their best in finding the bugs and helping out with questions. Interestingly enough, and I'm probably going to mention that later, yes, as Neven already pointed out, there is a misconception that developers do not like QA. In d.labs, the situation is quite the opposite, actually. You're smiling because in your situation. The developers are actually quite happy working with us because in the end, the product is actually better off this way, and the client gets a more or less improved version, less bugs, so developers actually seem like they're better. It's a bit of an optical illusion, but hey. And QA can rely on devs to get all the info on what they're testing and on product that they're handing over all the info needed for testing. Again, the developers here are so kind that they actually point out problems where the changes might actually affect. So that's also needed. This trust is needed because I'm not a developer. I know a bit of programming, but if I start checking their code, I'm not gonna know what the hell that thing does. And if somebody is doing something risky, the best thing they can do is, look, Igor, this is what we're gonna change. Please test this, and this, because this might affect the thing. So that's actually great. So how does it all come together? I'm going to show you on a bit of a feature. So once the feature is planned, and in the project we work, there's a lot of people involved just before even planning, designs and everything, and signing off. But once the feature is planned, this is where the testing starts. This is where QA is involved, this is where our feedback is appreciated, this is where our feedback is expected. Because we have to tell them, is this okay or not? If we find anything weird, and this is where all those meetings and all those dailies come in handy, because I know if something might affect other parts. Because right now we have 4 product managers and 12 developers. Those 4 product managers, okay, one of them is head product, so she knows everything that's going on. But the other 3 don't actually know much about other parts of the project. So I'm here to point that out, as in warn them or something like this. Like, what you're doing here is not quite consistent to the rest of the pages, something like they are expecting me to do. So once the feature is planned and the testing starts and the work starts, feature is then deployed when it's reasonably done on one of the test environments. Now, here's an interesting stat. We have 26 test environments. Out of those, 20 have been updated in the last 3 months because each feature gets their own test environment. Now, this might seem a bit of an overkill, but it actually works out very nicely because each team has their own, plus a feature own, plus, I don't know, sometimes you might change priorities and you need to start working on something else. You can always look what the person did in the previous thing. So the number of test environments is large, but it's very handy. And once I start testing, the first thing when I start finding weird stuff, and I usually find it quite often, more or less, the first thing I do is I discuss with the developer. That's my first reaction. I talk to the developer, okay, this doesn't look right, this doesn't work right, so we try to iron it out before it even gets to anything else. If me and the developer can't see eye to eye, which does happen, they insist on one thing, I insist on the second thing. The second step is basically talk to the product manager. That's their job. They have to make the decision. I say something, the developer says something. Look, the feature might look okay or might work okay, just the usability is not right. And it's product's decision what happens in the end. So you sometimes have to swallow your ego, but hey, it comes with the job. And once the changes are done, fixes, just basically repeat the previous two steps, deploy the changes, test again, discuss if I need it, and in the end we do a sync before release. If it's a large feature, we usually do a sync about a week before the deploy date. Just basically product manager, head developer, and me just go through the steps, just go check what's been done, what are the known issues, what known issues are we going to ignore because it's not worth fixing, or it's not important enough, or it will take too much time, or something like that. And basically, that's also usually the time the products test. The products actually test, in our case, just about before the deploy. They trust me to iron out any details before that. If I find something that's not working correctly, or it's not designed correctly, or something like that, I talk to them before, so they don't really bother with it. Just before the deploy is done, product should always check, do a test, do a quick test, just to see if everything's okay. If nothing else, that means that it's two people testing plus two developers, and then a deploy, and usually a hotfix after. But I'm not going to talk about that one. Now, as I was saying, this is 4 product managers divided into 3 teams, 12 developers, which are now 11 in Slovenia, 1 in UK, and me, the only QA guy. Thing is that this is a lot of feature being produced all the time, so I'm no longer involved as I would like to be, that's unfortunately, because I like to have control, but I still have full knowledge of what's going on. So the meetings, I think an usual week for me would be 10 hours of meetings per week. That's a weekly meeting of product team leads and tech leads discussing what will be done this week in the near future. That's on Monday. All team dailies, that's 1 hour each day. All team planning session for the next week, which is usually on Friday. 2 out of 3 team groomings session, which is for future work. I actually get excluded from one because you don't need to be there. And planning before a major feature is started to be worked on. So that's a lot of meetings. Calculated, that's 10 out of 40 hours, but it's worth it. And then 10 hours means that the rest of the time I am a lot more efficient. I know what's going on. I can switch priorities like this. As soon as somebody says, look, this is not a priority, test this. I might not have been involved from the start of the project, but I know what's going on. I know what we're doing, and I know why we're doing. Also, there's demo every Friday where we basically check what each team has done over the last week. If there's any special functionality, special changes that the rest of the developers need to be aware of, that's the time to present them. So conclusion from my side would be QA works best when informed. You have to know everything that's been going on with the product. Constant communication is required, and this is extremely hard to do, because if a product manager and a developers come to a conclusion, you have to know about it. If you don't know about it, you're going to be testing 2 weeks later, and you're going to reject something because those 2 guys have decided on their own to talk about it and say, okay, we're going to do differently, and nobody bothered to update the ticket. So unless you're included in everything, which can be a bit bothersome from time to time, but unless you're included in everything, you're wasting time, everybody's time. You're wasting your time testing because you're testing something that shouldn't be tested or something, and you're wasting time of product and developer because you're reporting something that's actually correct. They just didn't bother informing you. And with proper cooperation, which means that the product manager offloads some stuff on you, knowledge transfer, for example, product can focus on product. They can do their research, they can do their analysis, they can think about what they're going to do in the next 3 months, 3 weeks. For this particular project, we usually gather the whole team that's involved in development. We gather in the beginning of the year and go over the plans for this year. So everybody knows what's going to happen, more or less, this year. And then the next following weeks and months, the priorities are set. And like I said, interestingly enough, devs are actually happy with the arrangement. One of the developers from UK side that's no longer working there, but once told me, thank you, Igor, for making me look good. Because I point out the problems they have, they fix it. Once the product manager sees that, it's usually a more or less finished product, so it's a lot less problems for them. So the future, for us anyway, it's going to be divide and conquer, because by the end of the year the plan is to have 4 product managers and 19 developers and 3 QA. Oh, I get back up. So that's the plan for the end of the year. We are currently looking for 1 now and then 1 later, and which means that the work will be divided. Our problem is still be on all the meetings, but my focus will be split on one side while the other QA person will be doing the rest. And the project that I'm talking about is the business of fashion, which is something that started as a blog. It's now quite a big web page. It's a platform. It has job offerings from all the fashion companies, from Swarovski to Zara to H&M to Victoria Beckham even. It has courses. It has articles, exclusive content and everything. So that's basically it from my side. Any questions? Any questions?
When you're hiring a new guy or a new girl, what do you look for in a potential?
Somebody with a keen eye for detail. Experience for us is not really that important. It's nice if you're a tester, but we have test days to make sure that you know how to test. But one thing is, it's cultural fit, as in it feels okay to work with you, as in you don't get, I mean, it's a bit hard to explain, but sometimes you just hit it off with somebody right away. Yeah. It's also, we do look for a bit of product knowledge, because you are handling product managers and it's expected of us to give feedback. It's not just testing, it's proper. And we are sort of, we call it, they don't call it QA, they call it product support, because that's what you do. You're supporting product with development. So that's what we're kind of looking, tester with a bit of product knowledge, which is a bit of a hard thing to do, because as soon as somebody gets some product knowledge, they want to be a product manager. Right?
Right.
So that's a bit of an issue in Slovenia. So we started this meetup. One of the reasons was also to basically get more people into testing, because it's a fun profession. It really is a fun profession. To be honest, you don't really do anything. You find bugs, but you're not the person fixing them. That's somebody else's assignment. You just find it out. So it's a fun profession. It really is the best job in the world. So, any other questions?
How do you document all the testing?
That's a good question. The original stories are, it used to be Jira and Trello. Now it's Trello only. Depends on the project. Some projects have Jira, some have Trello. It again depends on the client. Some like to have everything reported, in every single thing reported separately as a ticket. In this case, they're a bit more relaxed about it. So it was usually, if there was a lot of little things, I just kind of set up an Excel spreadsheet, just listed things in, and we kind of colored them across depending on what needed. Now we basically open a Trello story, we just point out the issues in a checklist. The Trello story checklist combination is quite handy, because each item in the checklist can be then transformed into a single trial story very easily, so that works out a bit nicely. But I try to get things solved on the spot, which is basically sit down next to the developer, talk about it, let them fix it. If I know that it's either not important enough to fix right away, or it's going to be just put in backlog, I just talk to the product manager. If they agree, I put a story into the backlog, and then it probably gets forgotten forever.
But in that way, you just document the bugs.
Yes. Though, however, if we have a very large feature, we do make some sort of test plans, but it's the main intention for a test plan is not for me to list out any possible thing. It's basically just for me and the product managers to coordinate on what is important to be tested. Just so that when the feature is completed, I don't miss out on something. Because still, the product manager has the most knowledge for that particular part of the product. And I might miss something, so I basically list out all the test cases that I know of, and then we go through with the product manager, and he or she points out a few things, and then basically, that's usually the last time they ever check that list. It's just me then, before we deploy, I go through the checklist. So, but there's no like heavy duty test cases here. We tried, what was it?
Test row.
Test rail, yeah, we tried test rail, but it didn't really work out for us. Because this is, well, not this project is no longer a startup, but mostly it's startups, and things change so fast that if you write extensive test cases, things might change very often, so you're then stuck with updating the test cases. And in startups, things change very often, very quickly, and usually in a weird direction that was never thought of before. Because that's what agile developing is. You do something, you figure out if it's okay. If it's not, change the direction.
So, but if it's changed quickly, you have to test all small parts also then.
Yeah, and when it comes to testing, we do actually have on this project some automatic tests. It's about 1,100 test scenarios that are automatically run. But the logic behind it here is that if a feature has a high value and high probability of bugs, it will get automatic tests. If it has high value or high probability of bugs, it will get some test cases. Everything else, no, manual testing. Unfortunately, we are not that into front-end test cases yet, so end-to-end testing is not automated, unfortunately. So that means that after every critical release, the first thing I do is, can I use the register? Which is horrible, and it's exactly the thing you're not supposed to be doing, but we are at the moment. We are looking into automating front-end and end-to-end testing. You have a question, I think?
Yes, I had a question. Your communication with project manager is only on this weekly Monday meeting?
No, it's all the time. It's literally all the time.
Like regular, or just if you find something?
Actually, in the beginning, with the first product manager that had bad experience, we actually had a weekly meeting of 1 hour just basically checking up things. But now it's, when I see something weird, we use Slack for communication, so I basically just write a message on Slack and then they're going to respond. If they don't respond, I keep bugging them until they get a response. I am quite annoying in that regard. So developers can confirm that. I will get my answer one way or another because just want to clear things out as soon as possible. But no, the dailies are just basically for the team to see what other team members are doing and for the product to have a basic idea of what's going on. They do request stuff all the time, and they like 15-minute things just to make sure we're on the same page. Or if there's something weird, if I'm testing something and I find 5 things that I don't quite agree with, I wait a little, I get them in a list, and then basically call up the product manager. We do a 15-minute stick, go through those 5 items, make sure which ones are supposed to be saved or which ones are going to be just ignored.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You said before that with the startups the product changes a lot and it evolves. and there's a lot of effort put into making test cases. So
It's not. It's exactly the opposite. There is not a lot of effort put into test cases because the functionality changes so often that just simply writing test case could be redundant by the next week. So we do it if the client asks. Again, it depends on the client. If the client will specifically request it, yes, we will do it. There are more or less not.
Otherwise, you don't write test cases, but you test by according to the
I test according to the Trello stories or Jira tickets, basically. Jira, yeah, according to specifications. But we do exploratory testing too, because sometimes it's just basically click around a bit.
And I suppose as long as the product is evolving, you don't write test cases. But once the product becomes stable,
yeah, then you really should have a list of cases. Like for example, on this project, we completely redesigned the login token. So that meant that every goddamn single thing had to be tested, which means it took about 2 days for me to basically just write down everything, what has to be tested, how it's going to be tested, what has to be the expected result. And that's actually still used not by developers or not by testers, but just by, I don't know, I think it's the CTO was explaining the other day that that list is actually used for content team to know what's going on with the product, because they have a content team of their own. So just so they know what can be effective, just informational value. We do write test cases. It's usually the most boring part of the job. But hey, somebody's got to do it. It's horrible.
One more thing, you said you use automation tests.
Yeah.
Who does write the automation tests?
In our cases, is the developers writing the test cases. If they ask for it, we help them out. In one case, it was actually me and the developer sitting down for a day. We went through what has to be tested, what can be tested, but yes, it's all developers write their own tests.
Which program do you use?
For running tests, is Circle CI. The tests themselves are bhut. So it's basically just given this, then this. It's very basic tests, but like I said, we got about 1,100 scenarios. Unfortunately, not a single feature has more than 50% of their services covered by tests. So it is quite a large part. Any other questions?